Welcome to A Warm Embrace, your go to destination for all things motivation. I'm your host, Guillermo Lopez, and I'm thrilled to embark on this journey with you to explore the endless possibilities of self improvement, personal growth, and achieving your dream. Today, I'm being joined by Pape. Paul is a seasoned artist, designer, and entrepreneur with over 20 years of experience in the creative industry. His journey began with a passion for education, stemming from a need to escape an abusive childhood. Eventually, he found his way to design and fabrication, which led to the creation of thousands of personalized products for clients worldwide, as well as industry giants such as Disney, Universal, Nickelodeon, and more. In recent years, he's pivoted to empowering creatives, companies, and corporations, sharing his expertise and insights to help them embrace innovation and also reverse the creative crisis and make life and work fun again. As a speaker, educator, and mentor, he inspires others to unleash their creative potential and find fulfillment in their personal and professional lives. Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate it.
Great. Let me give our audience and you a little reminder of what a warm embrace is and what our podcast is about. And it's about cultivating an environment where individuals are not only acknowledged, but truly valued, understood, and embraced. We've built an ecosystem focused on ensuring that everyone feels seen, heard, and loved. And this is the guiding principle that extends across our various dimensions of life, which is personal, professional, emotional, and spiritual. We're genuinely delighted to have you, Paul, and we're excited to learn more about you and your unique perspectives and insights. So without further delay, are you ready to embark on this enriching journey with us?
100%. Let's do it.
Great. So today we'll be talking about navigating determination and cultivating tenacity and persistence in pursuit of goals. Considering your personal and professional backgrounds, Paul, why don't you start off by telling our audience what today's theme means to you?
I think determination it's definitely a mindset. I was talking with my wife about this morning. You guys had given me the prep notes for the show, and I was talking to her, and she is my sounding board. She's my rock. And so we love to have these discussions. And she said something to me. She's like, well, what is determination to you? And I go, honestly, I think it's because I'm dumb. Like I'm I hate to be braggery or anything like that, but I'm a smart person, but I also have like a very dumb side. I like to call it willful ignorance. I believe that anything is possible because when I was raised, I lived in my head. It was all imagination. And I believe that potentials are endless as long as you apply yourself. And the biggest roadblock that you get into it is your own personality, you get in your own way. I mean, obviously, there's going to be outside things that can cause roadblocks or even speed bumps, but for the most part, your own willfulness, your own determination is really going to be the driving force. And I find that I don't like to use the word dumb, but I mean to be ignorant of how those roadblocks appear and that they're even there, I think has been like the big driving force between me and my determination. So what it is for me is like what determination is it's just the ability to look past the obstacles so that you can continue to pursue your goals.
I like that. First and foremost, I appreciate you mentioning your wife because I too use my wife as a sounding board. And it's always great to credit those loved ones who really support us in these endeavors. And like you said, I use my wife as a sounding board for anything that I do. It's truly interesting how you mentioned the fact that you're calling it a willful ignorance and you're also giving it a self-deprecating manner or description by calling it dumb. And I see that as well because we oftentimes we block ourselves, and that block it goes back to that mindset where the idea is that we self-impose our own limitations. We think, oh, I can't do that. But then when we ask ourselves the question, why can't we do that? The answers are not that reasonable, if you will. And that's where I really dig what you're saying, because at the end of the day, those obstacles, once we change that mindset a little bit, they simply become challenges. And challenges are fun to overcome.
Yes, I was actually talking. I have a 12-year-old who he's about to get out of elementary school. Today is his last Friday of elementary school. He's going into middle school, and he's got dread. And I'm like, well, what are you so nervous about? And he's like, and he's 12. Keep this in mind. Well, it's about paying taxes and having to worry about the increasing cost of living. And I'm like, well, first off, you're 12. You've got a ways to go. It's okay. But I said, honestly, it is about fun. I said, I teach a course for artists and creatives on how to do your taxes because One, I love doing taxes because it is the best game that I play. And I think that's really the mindset of it, and is that you have to approach the things that you may dread in your life, approach it from a position of creativity, or from like, make it a game, make it fun, make it something that is not so dreadful, but more a challenge, but a challenge that you can overcome. My 12-year-old loves video games. And I'm like, if you approach taxes and the inevitable increase in the cost of living as you do these video games, this will not be a problem. And it comes back to determination. It's all about a mindset, how you perceive the issues that you may encounter, and whether they are surmountable or whether they're not. And then it all comes down to what's happening between your ears.
Yes. That's so true. And I love the fact that your 12-year-old is already worrying about taxes, because at the end of the day, he already has the foresight. It's funny because I just finished reading a book. It's a spy thriller. It's one of my vices. But it's funny because one of the characters is actually one of the children of the main character. And she's worried about global warming, and she's worried about the environment. And some of the dialogue that they are having makes me laugh, because I have to think back to when I was 12 years old or when I was 10 years old. What were my biggest worries? It's like, I love how children are now being so socially conscious. They're being so aware that it goes back to your original statement of sometimes feeling dumb. It's like, it makes my 12-year-old self feel dumb when I hear some of the kids these days talk.
It's amazing. And I read similar books, and I love the criticism that, like, of course you're going to have this child who is an ethereal knowledge, or base person, this godlike being in a child form is the biggest complaint. I'm like, no, I've got kids, and they do talk like that.
It's true. And that it really is just, if you don't actually interact with kids that much, you don't necessarily realize that these are little humans, but they're more than little humans. They're little adults. And they're catching on to the verbiage that we as adults use when we're around them. They're sponges that take on all our words. As you're saying, it's like you teach a class for creatives on taxes. And then lo and behold, your little one is now worried about taxes in the future. That's too funny.
I also think that with kids, it's about how you speak to them. I think that if you speak to a child like we imagine how children are, then that is how they will respond, because that is the conversation. We've always talked to our children as though they were equals, they were adults. We didn't use the baby talk, we didn't do any of that, and we didn't coddle to them. We would genuinely ask them to express themselves and to just have conversation. And we'll have deep conversations. I mean, not as, there some topics obviously are not quite there yet, but we do talk to them as though, like, they need to understand that we can have a serious conversation on an adult level, because then when they go out in public and they talk to other people, they say, wow, your child is so mature. And it's like, no, we just treat them like a human, like a person, and instead of coddling them. And I think it prepares them more to be able to go out into the world.
That's awesome. I mean, at the end of the day, you can always see how the kids that are raised in that particular fashion are so much more well rounded than the ones that are coddled, or the ones that are treated like we think children should be treated, as opposed to being treated as fellow human being, as opposed to being treated as another adult. It's not to say that they are being given the same responsibilities, because they're, at the end of the day, they're still children and they're still growing, but they are manifesting themselves with more purpose, if you will, as opposed to the more fantasy purpose that may have seen in the past.
Do you think that has to do with the amount of information that they're able to gather on the daily? Because, like, my son's always on TikTok, or he's watching whatever. But I'm like, as much as he's watching things about gaming or things, funny videos, there's a lot of social inequality that he sees. There's a lot of that kind of information, and like you said, they're sponges. They pick up on that, and then they're like, well, why isn't that? And I think it's great, because then it gives them the tools early enough in their life that they can pursue it, and hopefully not have to wait until they're in their 40s, 50s, or 60s to try and implement change.
Yeah.
They can
I
go
mean,
from
it's
there.
deluge of information completely, but which also allows for a conversation to be had with their parents. And by being able to communicate with and really allow for that dialogue, it really creates more mindful beings.
100%.
So, with that being said, can you actually share? And I know you used the example of your son, but can you share a personal experience where determination played a significant role in your success?
I like to tell this story. So I was in undergrad, and I'm big into education. Like I said in my intro there, I threw myself into it, and it's been something in my life that has been, it's almost like my church. I love an education in that capacity, and I believe that you get out of it what you put into it. And I was in undergrad, and I was in a 5-year program. I was in my 5th year, but I had already completed everything for my major. I just had some core classes that I had to get out, but I still didn't want to leave my major because it was theater. And so I said, well, let me take an advanced class. And they're, well, what do you want to do? And I thought about it. I'm like, well, I'd like to write and produce a show. And they said, oh, okay, what would the show be? And I was thinking, I was like, I think I want to take Nightmare Before Christmas, the Tim Burton stop motion animation show, and put it into a stage musical. And they're like, well, okay, well, you have to get the rights for that. And I'm like, okay, sure. So I called Disney, and I didn't know where to start. I'm a kid in Nebraska. I'm like, where do you start with this? I don't know. So what I did is I called Disney World. I called their help desk, and it's the friendliest place on earth. And they are required to get you your answers, regardless of how crazy it is. And so I called and I said, I would like to get the rights to Nightmare Before Christmas. And they said, we're the help desk. I'm like, yeah, help me. And so it took a while, but through a lot of phone messages and stuff, I ended up on the phone with Tim Burton himself.
Really?
Yeah. I talked to Danny Elfman. I talked to lawyers on Disney, and I ended up getting the rights. And if you Google deep enough, you'll see that I have the rights to the stage musical of Nightmare Before Christmas. And it was all because, again, it's that willful ignorance. It's like everyone, my professors were like, you'll never get it. And I'm like, says you. And I think it's possible. And the only obstacle is myself. It might take a lot of work, and it did. It took, and a lot of conversations and learning information, learning structures of how rights work. Like I thought I just need to talk to Tim Burton and then I can get the rights. Well, he doesn't have the rights. Disney has the rights. So then I'm having to deal with that. But we wanted to get the music. So we had to I thought, well, let's talk to Danny Elfman, because we wanted to write a couple new songs because it's, new production. And so we had to make sure that he was okay with that. But then it wasn't him that he had to be okay with it. It was his people, his agencies. And it was just a matter of finding this person. Oh, got to get more information, going over here. And it's just that determination to line it all up. And then eventually it happened and we did the show.
That's awesome. I tend to think that with regard to determination, there's also, and I think that you put it so succinctly, it's the idea of not understanding that there can be or that there are any limits. Would that be a good summary of that?
Yeah, I mean, there's always going to be obstacles to anything that you do, but there's always a path through it. I love to tell people in life, it's important to bend, not break. Don't be so rigid in your thinking process that obstacles cause you to stop. You always want to have momentum. So the idea is to be a reed in the wind and to bend. If an obstacle appears before you, bend to the side, work around it. Don't be so rigid that it breaks you. And I think as long as you have that mindset, you can get through a lot of things.
I agree. And the reason I was saying that is because sometimes when we don't think that there may be a limitation, we don't stop. And it goes back to the momentum as you're speaking about. It reminds me of a personal anecdote. It's like when my wife and I got married, there's a bit of a backstory, but two of her best friends were getting married at the same time. And one of them happened to get married in Argentina. And this was a huge affair. It was a beautiful affair. But at the end of the day, it wasn't really about the couple, because it was a very social event for her family. And it was few and far between. There were few people that actually went that were actually her close friends. It was my wife, my now wife, and myself, and then and then a couple, which is a friend of ours. And when we saw that wedding, we said, it's like, you know what? That wedding became more about the people. It did not become about them. So my wife, when we were flying back to Miami, she mentioned, she's like, you know what? Have you ever thought about a destination wedding? And I said, you know what? I've always loved the idea of a destination wedding. And she goes, you know what? I would love to get married at the Vatican. And I said, why not? I had never heard the possibility of getting married at the Vatican. You think about it being the largest church in the world, but you never heard that there was not a possibility to be able to get married. I mean, by all accounts, it's a church. You can get married. And you know what? Let me start doing some digging. Let me start going ahead and start doing some research. Let me start making some calls. At the end of the day, it turned out to be a much easier experience and a much easier process than I would have thought. I really thought, I was like, this is the Vatican. Of course, you can't get married. Because then I would have started putting all these obstacles myself that didn't exist. And it turned out to be an amazing experience, an amazing memory for both of us. But I like to think about the fact that if I had been as rigid in my thought process, as you say, and thought, no, it can't be done, then it wouldn't have been done. But the fact that I said, you know what, why not us try? I don't lose anything in asking. I don't lose anything in making a phone call. I don't lose anything in doing some research. And by doing that, one answer, one phone call turned into a second one, and another turned into another one. And then I got in touch with the right people. And at the end of the day, I was able to have this amazing memory in my life because I didn't think that it couldn't be done. That's a really cool experience. I mean, personally, I think of it as that was something that I was determined to overcome. Of course, at the time, I probably didn't necessarily think of it that way. But also hearing your story, I mean, how many people can actually say that they actually got Tim Burton on the line? How many people can say that, as you said, if you dig deep enough, you can find that you actually own the rights, or that you hold the rights rather, to a musical for A Nightmare Before Christmas, which is one of the most famous movies that our generation can think of. That's amazing.
Yeah, my coach likes to say that your ordinary is everyone else's extraordinary, and I forget that from time to time. My life has been a very interesting one because of all the things the people I've been able to work with, the things that I've been able to make. But to me, it's my job. I have to remember every once in a while when you say these things out loud that people are like, "You did what now?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, that was just a thing that I did," and it is. It can be. It is pretty impressive. Again, if you don't get in your own way, they are just obstacles, and the people that I'm talking to, well, Tim Burton, very cool. I love Tim Burton, but he's just a human. And so the ability to be like, can I talk to another human without being weird about it? Which reminds me of a story when I had an opportunity to work with, it was a podcast live show called Thrilling Adventure Hour, which was like a 1930s radio style play, but they used famous people as their actors. So whenever they would have some time off, they'd come in and they'd do this live show at the Largo down in Los Angeles. And they asked me if I would be willing to make their merchandise because they'd been doing it for a while. They wanted a bunch of cool merch. And I'm like, sure. And when I flew in there, my friend who was the director, he's like, the only note I can ever give you is that they may be famous, but they are just people. And they really just want to be treated like people. So as long as you treat them like people, like normal, don't fanboy, don't do any of that stuff. Just treat them like a normal human being. They will embrace you and you'll just be part of the group. And really just taking that to heart in everything that I do. I've got a podcast partner who anytime he sees any celebrity anywhere, he's got to run over, and he's 65 years old, but he will still run over and fanboy and, can I get a picture and all this? And I'm like, why? That poor person just wanted to eat their dinner, dude. So I think like when you talk about things like, talking to Tim Burton or something like that, while it is an obstacle and it is about determination, it is at the end of the day, they're just people too. They just happen to be people in a very particular spotlight. I am sure that there are people in your life who look up to you and think it's impossible to talk to Guillermo. I couldn't ask him this because he's here and I feel I'm down here. But in reality, I'm sure if they walked up to you and said, Guillermo, can you'd be like, yeah, sure. Why not? Because again, you're just a person and we're just all going through this experience. We just happen to have different experiences along the way.
Agreed, and that has been the case with me. That people seem to know me before I know them. And when they finally meet, they think, "Wow, it's so easy to talk to you." And I'm like, "Well, you should have just come up. I would have been happy to talk to you." And I'm reminded about your son. They were having this dread about being able to speak to me, almost like, "Oh, is Guillermo going to be the same Guillermo that I know him as?" Like, I like to think that I am. So, and somebody has actually asked me, it's like, well, I was actually worried that you might not be the same person. And I'm like, okay, now what do you think? They actually do say that, of course. And so, worry that they were feeling was completely unnecessary. And sometimes I try to remind myself of that because, as you say, we're human and we tend to have these experiences. There are moments that when we're not comfortable, or this is something that's going to be new to us, we actually try to go ahead and we think about all of the negatives around it. Or we think it's like, oh, what if I don't do this right? Or what if I don't say the right word? We bog ourselves down with worry. And then at the end of the day, we have this sigh of relief when it's over and we think we made it bigger than it actually was. It wasn't that painful. We're expecting to have our arms cut off when it really was just a minor prick, for lack of a different metaphor. But at the end of the day, that's what you make of things. And when you use that example, it's like humans are humans. Tim Burton is human. Any person that we meet is human. And as long as they're being treated in that regard, they're going to embrace you.
100%. So it comes back to determination. We are our biggest obstacle. Our mentality is our biggest obstacle. And if we are determined, that willful ignorance comes into play here, because if you believe that it is possible, and I teach my sons, I say, as long as you understand that whenever you ask a question or whenever you want to do something, understand that there are multiple outcomes. As long as you are completely grasping that there are multiple outcomes and any of them can happen, then whatever happens is not a deterrent. It doesn't stop you. It's always keeping that momentum going. And so when they want to pursue something new, we may tell them no, but it's not a no forever, or no, let's approach from a different direction. But they also understand, okay, no was an answer. So they're not going to throw a fit. It's not going to abruptly stop them. It's just another minor obstacle. And it's a mentality thing, 100% mentality about getting over these obstacles.
And I like that. As far as no is not a final answer. No could be no right now, or no can actually be the answer, or but no, have you thought of this? And then it's actually a perfect lead into the next question, where I want to ask you, what are some common obstacles or challenges that individuals face when trying to cultivate determination and persistence?
I think the biggest one is our own self-doubt. My wife likes to tell me that people are not thinking about you as much as you are thinking that they are thinking about you. And I think in that, get in our own way. We are literally our own worst opponent. And when you let go of that, then you notice that the world kind of opens up. But there's also at the same time, we have, like, you'll notice that outside influences will try and pull you back down. But as long as you've got that mindset, you can work through it. So as far as like the biggest obstacle besides yourself, it's the motivation, the fear. It's like, I love to use the analogy of a boulder on a mountainside. That boulder has stood there, and that boulder is your motivation. The thing is it doesn't take a lot to get it going once it's going. But that first push, you got to really put your back into it. You've got to have faith that you can move that boulder. But once it starts, it goes down the hill, no problem. And that's, people ask me, like, how do you get in front of a camera and talk? How do you get up on stage and talk? I just do it. I just walk out on stage. I just embrace it. And I say it's like a 2 feet in type of living. It's just, I just jump into it, because testing the water with a toe will never give you the full, you gauge temperature. You cannot tell what is actually going to occur. And so, when you jump in, you're in it. There's no way to get around it. And so, besides yourself, and then the determination to take that first step, I think those are the two biggest things that get in your way, and they're easy to overcome theoretically. It's really it's a mindset. It's say, well, just do it. But a lot of people, they fear of failure, fear of ridicule, fear of it all comes back to failure.
It's a fear of not feeling enough.
Right. As a creative, they say, if I could give one piece of advice, this is one of my favorites, is what would it be? And my best piece of advice I can give anybody is to fail. Fail. Because you don't learn from doing it right. You learn from failure. And failure has such a negative connotation these days. It used to be, like, way back in the time of philosophers and all of this, failure was intentional. It was, we would pursue because we knew that in doing something incorrectly, there was a nugget of wisdom within it that allowed us to eventually achieve our goal. But not only that, it allowed us to find, discover, and innovate in ways that we didn't know were possible. Some of the best inventions in this civilization have occurred by accident. One of my favorites is vulcanized rubber. We use it every single day, and it was found by accident because they were trying to find a way to make shoes work longer. And so it was literally somebody in their kitchen goofing around trying to figure out, working for DuPont, trying to figure out how to make rubber better, and they vulcanized it and found out it was super durable, and it changed industries. It changed the entire projection of humanity on accident. It's that ability to fail creatively. That's what I like to say, fail creatively, to move yourself forward. So abolish the fear of failure, know that it's going to happen, and embrace it, because you can learn. Come back to the education again. So yeah, long way to get an answer.
No, I very much appreciate it, because it's like I love to use the Edison example. It's like, how many tries did he do with regard to the incandescent light bulb? It was in the thousands. In order for us,
10,000.
to now be able to enjoy the fruits of his labor, but he was never deterred by each of those failures. He actually used each failure as a jumping off point to the next. He learned something from it, and he created something that the masses now use. It's like, I love that example, because what if he got in his own way? What if he let somebody else get in his way? How far behind would we be if he had just let it slip away? If he had not let creative failures fuel him to the next. And I love that. And going back to what you originally said that your wife tells you, it's true. Theoretically, we like to think that people are thinking about themselves more than they're thinking about us. When we tell ourselves that is something that appeases us for just a moment, but it's with constant practice that we need to go ahead and remember that. It's like, yes, I'm thinking about myself more than I'm thinking you are thinking about me. Or you're thinking about yourself more than I think that you're thinking about me. I know it sounds completely convoluted, but that's the truth. It's like we are all thinking about ourselves more than we're thinking about somebody else because we want to make sure that we speak well. We want to make sure that we're doing it right. And we're putting our best foot forward, to borrow from your analogy. The idea behind all of that is then we're internalizing it. And block, we ourselves are putting in our lives that shape determination or that determination overcomes. So, with that, what are some specific strategies and techniques for building resilience and staying determined in the face of adversity?
It's about a daily practice. It's about, I teach a system called the P.L.A.Y system, which encourage people to play all the time. We have a tendency to fear failure. And so we want to get the right answer and we want to do it correct all the time. And if you think about it, when we were kids, we didn't have that fear. When we went to play, we would just play. There were no rules. We made them up. And so I encourage people to play, but it's an acronym that stands for ponder, learn, apply, and yield. It's a daily practice of getting out of your own way to figure out how to do things in ways that you wouldn't necessarily think about doing them, and then constantly learning, so that the more knowledge that you gather, the easier things become in life. And so we often get in an obstacle. We see an obstacle and we think, I don't know how to get around this. When I'm designing, like we'll say the Tonight Show calls me up and they're like, Paul, we need a singing, dancing robot. This has happened. And we need it in about 4 days. Can you make this? The answer is yes. But I don't make singing, dancing robots. I mean, that's not my thing. But how do I do that? And when I tell people that this is a job that came across my table, the first thing that they think of is I have to figure out how to make a singing, dancing robot. That's what they see. They see the end product. But in reality, it's how do you break that down? Well, we know it needs to sing. We know it needs to dance. We know it needs to look like a robot. It needs to be a robot. So how are all these pieces put together? That all comes from knowledge. Taking all that information in from different avenues. So constantly learn, constantly explore, constantly play, and then you're able to apply all of those together. And so it's a daily practice of being determined, of finding an obstacle and overcoming it. I was reading a great book today, How to Think Like a Rocket Scientist. And one of the things that they brought up in it was that we are given books that say, textbooks that say, this is how this is done. But in reality, that answer that they found in there is one of many different ways to approach the solution to a problem. They didn't just one day, God didn't just sit there and jiggle your gray matter one day and said, this is the answer. What happens is we explore, we play, we think, we ponder all of this information. And then through our understanding, through our gathering of learning, our knowledge, we're able to apply this information to get an answer. There are so many different, all roads lead to Rome, right? Like, it's so many different ways to approach these things, so that when we're given a book and says these are the answers, that it forms a false sense of security, because then when we're thinking, when we need to face determination, when we have an obstacle in front of us, we have a tendency, because we've been programmed this way, to think that there is one solution. One thing that we talk about in business a lot is thinking outside the box. The problem is people don't understand what the box actually is. And the box is that conditioning throughout your life that there are one solution to everything. Business even fall into that. And so the idea is that think about it from a different direction. Think about it completely wrong without the fear of failure. And then you'll notice that there's lots of different ways to get to something, to get it accomplished. Great example of this is, look at anybody who has a disability. They're still able to maneuver themselves through life created for people without disabilities with their disability. They're just approaching it from a different perspective. They're able to accomplish things through determination because they need to do these things. And they're able to just do that. I mean, I'm a left-handed person, and left-handed people are 20% more likely to die in a car accident than right-handed people, because we've created driving to be right-handed. And so our reaction is to naturally go towards our dominant hand. Well, to me, that puts me into oncoming traffic.
Yes.
As opposed to going into a ditch or off the road. And so you have to train yourself, but that's an obstacle. I love to drive. I love it. And so it's just about, well, that's not going to be an obstacle for me. That being left-handed is not going to be an obstacle. My first mentor does not have a leg and was born without it. And he's on the record as having the tiniest artificial limb when he was a baby, because his doctor hand carved it for him. And so he's always been like, I've got two legs. They're just one of them just comes off, and it's a determination to get through it. And so again, that's the long way to get to the answer, but I think that's the
Oh,
truth.
not at all. I love it. I mean, you said something with regard to thinking outside the box, and yes, it's so true that we've been so conditioned to that. But one of the things that I've recently learned within the past years is the whole thought process that there is no box because the box is self-imposed. That's where we come into like that to really come back to the whole mindset matter. It's that we pose our own limitations. Of course, there are some natural limitations that we have to take into consideration. But the truth of the matter is that those, just like mentor, it's like I have two legs, just one actually removes. It's like another person would think, oh, I only have one leg. But no, I am lured by that mentality because at the end of the day, yes, he does have two legs. And he looks at him very differently. It goes back to the whole how you viewed the walking, singing, and dancing robot. It's like, okay, you know that you need to create a robot. You know that it needs to sing and needs to dance and it needs to talk. And walk rather. But the idea behind all of that, it's you did not necessarily come out to think that this was something that you were going to do immediately, but you knew that you could do it, that it could be done. And it was just a matter of just changing that perspective. And I think that's something that's amazing, especially to our audience, because when we think about that, I always love those just turns of phrases or that turn of perspective to hear somebody think that what most people think, oh, this person has one leg. No, he has two legs. He just happens to have the ability to remove one. That's an awesome thought because it just changes everything. It's like it's that whole mind-blowing thought because at the end of the day, it's a game changer. He doesn't see himself as being limited. Rather, he sees himself as being different, but in an awesome way, if you will. I think that's pretty damn cool. And with that, mention the whole idea of having to, let's say, use that example of the robot, right? And you look at it from all different avenues on how to create what you need to create. But what do you think about goal setting? In my mind, that could be something. It's like, okay, you take something, oh, you can go ahead and do it. But does that work with regard to setting goals and how that contribute to cultivating determination? And if that's the case, what are some best practices for setting and pursuing achievable goals?
So I think goal setting is paramount to life. I think, and I've experienced in my life that when you're being interviewed for a job, they say, "Well, what's your 5 year goal, your 10 year goal?" And we often give ourselves lofty goals, um, but at the same time, we'll give ourselves checklists. Like this is the thing I've got to get done in the week, and then we'll check it off. Those are goals. What we do is we have a tendency to, when we forward think, when we future plan, we give ourselves almost unattainable goals to set ourselves up to fail. And so what I recommend is that when you're setting up goals, set find your ridiculous goal and bring it back 10%. And you would be surprised how many times you will surpass that original goal just by lowering the bar just enough so that you think, oh, that's attainable, because it's a mindset, it's a determination thing. And so when doing it, I also recommend strongly that when you're setting up your goals, set up short term goals that you know are truly attainable, like a checklist. Because then when you hit that milestone, and you're always going to look at it in the rear view mirror, because rarely do you get to the milestone and stop. Because again, the momentum. You get to that milestone, you get past it, and you're like, oh, wait, that was a goal. I can check that off now. And look, it's already behind me. I'm already moving past it to the next goal. And so set yourself short term goals that are attainable so that you know that you're making the progress that you need to make, even if it has to be a daily one to get you kind of into that momentum kind of feeling. Set something simple as, today I'm going to write 3 pages, or today I'm going to finally clean the room, or whatever. Or if cleaning is your thing that you don't want to do, give yourself a checklist of all the things that you can clean, so you can start seeing that checklist come down, and you're like, wow, I've accomplished so much, even though the goal is not quite there. And so when setting goals, make them achievable. Give yourself the thing that you really want that's way out in the distance, but drop it just 10%. Because that mentality of, I don't need to get, I don't, I'd love to have $5 million in 5 years. Sure, I would love that as a goal. But can I make $100,000 this year? That's an attainable goal, I think. Genuinely attainable, because that number 5 million is so astronomical to us. It's why we buy lotto tickets, because we see million up there and we're like, there is no way I'll ever get that. But in reality, if you work a steady job throughout your entire adult life, you've earned over $1 million. You just didn't get it all at once, and we want that. So to see that 5-year goal of $5 million, yeah, that seems unattainable. Well, what about a 1-year goal of $100,000 or go higher? $100,000 is easily attainable. You can get past that. How are you going to do it? It's about determination. And so set your goals, attainable, but not so low that you walk right past them, because that's not really a goal anymore. That's something that you can definitely do. So that'd be my answer.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Paul. I mean, this has been an amazing time that we've been able to spend together. And I like to end my episodes by doing a recap of some of the items that we discussed. I mean, you gave us a treasure trove of information and of stories and of ideas, but the key standouts are really the whole concept that obstacles are limited to our mindset. We look at it from a very different way, we can always find the answer. And the whole notion is like really thinking about the box differently and just changing, pivoting those thoughts, being to use the example of differently abled people, how they're able to go ahead and achieve the same thing that everybody can go ahead and achieve, but they just do it differently. That's amazing. And I have to go ahead and point out your acronym of PLAY, of ponder, of learn, of apply, and of yield. Because at the end of the day, if we actually approach our days with play, with like that childlike wonder of that energy, we can achieve so much. It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure, Paul. And I want to give you that opportunity. I know I don't want to seem that I've summarized trove of information in such a minimal way, but I want to give you that opportunity to go ahead and give us, what do you think your key insights and takeaways are? What do you want to go ahead and have our audience remember from your experiences and from your thoughts about determination?
Well, if your audience can take anything away from this, I wish that they would play more. Embrace being willfully ignorant in your play, because that opens up the doors to the world. It is the keys to the kingdom, is allowing yourself to get out of your own way and to embrace failure. Embrace it. It's not the evil that we make it out to be. It is actually the seed of innovation.
That's amazing. And Paul, if our audience wants to learn more about you, how can they go ahead and find you? Where can they go ahead? How can they learn more about you? How can they find you? How can they connect with you if they so desire?
I have a website which is for my coaching and consulting and speaking, which is paulpape.it. I say you just got to Paul Pape it. And then I also have my design company is called Pape Designs. And I'm everywhere on the internet as Pape Designs. And so you can find me on all the social medias. I have YouTube channels, all of this stuff. I'm on Twitch TV as well. All of those areas, you can find me there. And I am a treasure trove of useless information, as my wife would say. So if you have a question, please feel free to reach out. I love to help and I love to teach.
Well, thank you so much. We very much appreciate that offer for the audience of A Warm Embrace, because at the end of the day, what you've given us today has been truly invaluable. And of course, I can't act this episode without thanking our audience. You all are beautiful, and I appreciate each and every one of the comments that you all send us to our different channels. As you know, we're available on all major social media platforms, as well as our podcast channels. And we invite you to share, and we invite you to keep following us. And once again, from my heart to yours, a warm embrace.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting us by liking and subscribing to our channel. Your small gesture means the world to us and helps us continue creating more content like this. See you in the next video.